And the first question stands in the name of the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Acting Minister of Energy and Resources and asks, does she accept her Ministry's advice that the value of New Zealand's onshore minerals, excluding hydrocarbons, is $194 billion overall, with $80 billion estimated in Schedule 4 land? If so, what plans does the Government have to allow their development?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
E te mana whakawā. To the first part of the question, I accept the Ministry of Economic Development's advice that an estimate of the gross value of New Zealand's in-ground onshore minerals, excluding hydrocarbons, is $194 billion. To the second part of the question, the Government has made it clear it does not intend to remove any land from Schedule 4. However, the Government is interested in seeing an increase in mineral activity on non-Schedule 4 land in which there is considerable potential and has taken a number of steps to encourage that.
The Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, why is it that the Government thinks a simple hole in the ground is so damaging that the country should forego $80,000 million of wealth, the jobs, the investment in the growth, and instead live hand-to-mouth, borrowing $300 million a week?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, the member will know that the Government recognises the need to balance economic opportunities with environmental responsibility. New Zealand has had a robust debate about mining on Schedule 4 land. The Government listened to the debate and ruled out removing land from Schedule 4. However, like the member, the Government is keen to see New Zealand's extensive mineral wealth utilised in a responsible way for the benefit of all New Zealanders and is taking a number of steps to encourage that.
The Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister share with the House the number of jobs and lost opportunities that the decision to leave that $80 billion under the ground represents, or is it in fact the case that the Government doesn't know?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
The Government has taken a number of steps to explore opportunities on non-Schedule 4 lands, including undertaking a significant aeromagnetic survey in Northland and on the west coast of the South Island to learn more about which areas have the highest concentrations of valuable minerals.
Point of order, the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
I think, Mr Speaker, you can anticipate my point of order. That answer did not address what was a straightforward question about Schedule 4 land, not the other land.
I invite the member to repeat his question, bearing in mind that he is addressing the question to the Acting Minister of Energy and Resources, the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Sir, thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister share with the House the trade-off in terms of jobs and lost opportunity, leaving the $80,000 million of minerals under the Schedule 4 land represents, or does the Minister not know?
Mr Speaker, as I answered to the primary question, the Government is focused on the $114 billion worth of mineral potential on non-Schedule 4 land, and that is what we are exploring.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order. The Honourable Rodney Hyde. A point of order has been called.
Mr Order. Mr Speaker, again with the greatest respect, that was a perfectly fine answer to the first question, but the third question was different. It was to the point. The Minister could have answered it quite simply, but repeating the answer to the first question is not answering the third question, which was straightforward.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I think unfortunately the member did give an alternative whether the Government knew or not, and I think the answer actually indicated they didn't.
Order. I blame myself for having allowed that point of order, which was not particularly helpful. But I think on this occasion, in fairness, the member asked whether the government had weighed up the opportunities or the costs and benefits and opportunities against the costs of not taking action. And the minister's reply was that the government is focused on a certain portion of the mineral extent that was identified in the primary question. And I believe that was an answer to the question. I did listen carefully, and I think with this kind of question, there's no particular answer to it, and the minister chose to answer it in that way, and I believe that was not unreasonable. Point of order, the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
I tread warily, Mr. Speaker, but that was not my question. I did not ask about the trade-off and whether they'd consider it. I specifically asked twice, did the government know, could the minister share with the House the trade-off, or did they not know? Now, talking about what the government has focused on in the other land is definitely not addressing that question. The minister could just say, look, we don't know because we didn't do the work, but you can't talk about something entirely different.
I think the member is being unreasonable because if he thinks about his question, it was what I summarised in very loose terms. I don't pretend to be perfect in summarising a member's question, but the answer that the minister has given was her reaction to that issue, that on behalf of the government, she says the government is focused on a certain part of it. And having weighed up the costs and benefits of the entire mineral estate, the government is focused on a certain part of it. And in answering it that way, I believe she did address the issue of trade-offs. But there's no specific answer to that question, and that's why I'm not being any harder on the minister in trying to get a particular answer from me, because there is no particular answer to that question. Question number 2, point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I know that the question of the transfer of questions is fraught, and I have had a discussion on this issue with your office, not as to the ability of ministers to transfer, but as to what happens with the question, the wording of the question when one has been transferred, as this one has been. This question, as you know, Sir, was originally drafted to go to the Prime Minister's knowledge and of a particular situation. We accept his right to choose not to answer the question and to transfer it. But the question is, when a question is transferred to another minister, whether we can get a better format around the words which when it is the actual advice especially from the Prime Minister's office and his department, which we're focusing on, which no other minister can have responsibility for.
Well, my understanding is the wording when this question was transferred, my understanding is the wording was amended so that the question still focuses on what advice has the Prime Minister, the government or Rugby New Zealand 2011 been given. And so the focus of the question remains on what advice the Prime Minister or what the Prime Minister knows about it. And obviously in transferring the question, one would expect that the Minister for the Rugby World Cup will have knowledge of that, or the question shouldn't have been transferred. I mean, it's very simple, that questions should not be transferred to avoid being able to question someone, the only person who might have knowledge of something.
And further point of order, I mean, it is a relatively obvious one, and that is that the Minister of the Rugby World Cup cannot have responsibility for the advice that is given from agencies for which he is not responsible. Clearly, those further down the line, the Ministry for Economic Development, Rugby World Cup 2011, he does, but he cannot have responsibility for advice given, as was given in this case by the Prime Minister's office and the department, because he's not part of that chain, sir. And I know this is a hard question, but we have had, I think, 17 that we've seen public statements from the Prime Minister in the last day on this, and it just seems to me that even if the Prime Minister is not able to answer it, it would have been better to leave it to the Prime Minister and have an acting minister to answer.
That is a matter totally for the government who answers questions. But I repeat what I said a moment ago. If I as Speaker perceive that a question is being transferred so that the only minister who could possibly have access to or have the information that is the focus of the question, I'd become very concerned about that, because if the question was being transferred to avoid the only minister who could possibly have responsibility or knowledge of the matter, that would be a serious matter. Now, it would be my understanding that in the transferal of this question, I'd expect the minister to have knowledge of what the Prime Minister has been advised. Whether he divulges that to the House, whether or not that's in the public interest to do so, is another matter. But I'd expect the minister, if the question has been transferred, that the minister will have knowledge of the subject matter. Question number 2, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Point of order, Charles Chauvel.
Sir, I beg your pardon. I know that I've lost the flow. I was seeking to take a call on a supplementary question, but you didn't see or hear me.
I beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. So can I revert to question 1, and my sincere apologies, Charles Chauvel, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Acting Minister of Energy and Resources and asks whether she's seen the reports valuing mineral resources and mining's impact on tourism, both by Terry consultants, which show that the actual value of the proposal in the primary question is nothing like $80 billion, that it's more like $25 per person, and that's before taking into account the tourism revenue that New Zealand would lose if the proposal proceeded.
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
No.
Point of order, Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, sir. I seek leave for the Minister's benefit to table the 2 reports to which I referred in my supplementary question.
Leave is sought to table those documents. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 2, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.